Hey everybody, I'm Andy Smith, your hostess with the mostest. I'm a 30-year comic book veteran, having worked for Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Image Comics, Cross Generation, Ominous Press. You name it, I've probably worked for them. And I do other things art-wise outside of comics in the field of advertising. I've also written some books on drawing comics you might have seen. Drawing American manga superheroes, Drawing Dynamic Comics was my first book. And I also did the handy little How to Draw Superhero sketchbook where all you need is a pencil because you do all the work right inside the book. Enough about that. This is the Book Look series. The Book Look series is where I grab a book off my library. You can see the tons of books I have behind me. And I go through it page by page with you so you can see if it's a book that you might want to buy. I like to know what I want to buy before I buy it, and I feel this is a way to give you some insight into these books. So join me for today's Book Look. Thanks. Welcome to today's Book Look, John Buscema, Michelangelo of Comics by Brian Peck. You're like, wait a second, how many John Buscema books do you own? If this is your first video that you're watching of mine, this is the first one you've seen, but if you go back through my videos, I have quite a number of John Buscema books that I've shown these book looks of, and I still have one more, I believe, left in my arsenal. I love John Buscema, one of my favorite all-time comic book artists. Part of it's because of his anatomy. It is very reminiscent of just great old-school drawing. John was born, I believe, in 1926, and he learned drawing from the likes of studying Michelangelo and other classically trained anatomy, or artist anatomy, whatever. I'm tongue-tied because I just love John Buscema. So let's look through this book. I am your host, Andy Smith, 30-year veteran of the comic book industry. Currently working on First Man from Astonishing Comics, my own comic book publishing company. And please give it a look. If you like indie comics, great superhero stuff, you will love First Man. John Buscema, Michelangelo of Comics, with an introduction by Roy Thomas. This book came out in 2010. It's 172 pages. John Buscema and Me, the introduction. These are shots that John did, I believe, when he first started Avengers, after I think Don Heck left the book. I love the Hercules, very Steve Reeves in the face. Steve Reeves was an old school bodybuilder from the 50s that played Hercules in a couple movies. And John Buscema actually did the movie adaptations for Dell Comics. He did one of them with Hercules, and it's gorgeous. So love this. John's storytelling really just wowed and was so dynamic with the way he did his figure work and stuff. After Stan Lee basically said, Jack Kirby is great at dynamic comics. Look at that stuff to get those dynamics in your work. If you look at some of John's early work for Dell, even in that issue of Hercules, you can see the great craftsmanship and storytelling, but the dynamics that he brought and learned and did at Marvel Comics weren't there yet. Of course, John is well known for Conan. If he could draw anything for his entire career, it would have been Conan, I believe. Even though I love his Tarzan better, I know. Early John Buscema piece here from, it doesn't say the year. Wild Bill Pecos, Western number 33 Splash. You know, John was probably 20-something when he did this. Oh, it's 1952. So he was 26 when he did that. And then here we've got, oh, this is the wanted cover. So he was 26 when he did that. This one up here doesn't say a date. It's early John work. Some more early stuff. Crime Fighter number 4, page 8. Crime Fighter number 4, page 9. You know, if you just showed me these and said, who drew these? I really don't think I would have even said John Buscema. Now this definitely has more of a John Buscema feel to it. This is from 1952. See a little bit in the face, the figure drawing. This, I believe, is from Indian Chief. This is Indian Chief number 30. Dell Comics. This is before his Marvel stuff. This is in the 1950s, I believe, late 50s. I can definitely see John Buscema all over this page. He inked it himself. His inking style, just a great bear. Same with over here. I mean, this looks like it's right out of Conan. Very classically drawn. Just great work. Compositions are fantastic in each panel. You can tell, I believe Frazetta was an influence on John's work. Roy Rogers Comics, inside cover. Look at that. This is 4-Color Comics 944. Sinbad. I'm collecting all the stuff John did for Dell. I almost have it all. I'm only missing a few issues. Luckily, he didn't do a ton, and luckily these things aren't super expensive. And then, oh, love this book. This is one of my favorite covers. George Rousseau inked this cover. This is one of John's first works at Marvel, Tales to Astonish, number 85, page 9. One of the first times he would draw the Hulk. First and not the last. Here's one thing I love about John's work, and I think he picked it up from Kirby. I love the shapes he would put in back for the tech. And the way he would spot the blacks, the shadows and stuff on the tech, and just the odd shapes and stuff he would do. That might have been, no, that wasn't. This might be John's first issue of Avengers. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on it. Issue 41. And then we have some more interior work. Cover, I believe this was inked by, oh, it says George Rousseau. I thought that was Vinnie Coletta. Oh, I was wrong. So this really breaks down the history of John's career. Obviously, we're up into the Marvel time now. But once again, if you're a fan of John Buscema's work, like I said, I've got 3 or 4 or maybe 5 John Buscema books. And each one, some of them repeat artwork and some of them have art I've never seen before. This is an inker spotlight on George Klein, who did a lot of inking over him. So you get a little breakdown on him. His best known work was for DC, was inking over Kurt Swan. So working on Kurt and John Buscema. Back then, you didn't know you were working on these guys that would become these monolithic like icons of the comic book industry when you were doing it. That's a cover recreation John did. This is one of my favorite splash pages by John of the Vision crying. I believe inker Scott Williams owns this piece of art, which I'm just like, oh, Scott, I would love to just see that original. Obviously, I'd love to own it, but just seeing it, beautiful brush feathering in here. You can see the faint pencil that was erased out. It's either pencil or white out. That you can see how he used to have the cape and stuff and it had to be revised. Even an android can cry. More of that great John Buscema tech back there. Inker Spotlight, Tom Palmer. Tom Palmer and John Buscema worked together for a long period of time on some early Avengers stuff. And then in the 80s, they worked together again on Avengers. John said he never really enjoyed drawing superheroes. That was just a paycheck for him, but his love was Conan. But I tell you what, his superhero stuff to me was just some of the best. His Submariner run was fantastic. I think his Submariner run is my favorite of all the runs he had. And then Silver Surfer is probably number 2. And Avengers is number 3. Beautiful inks by Frank Giacoia. Frank Giacoia really chunked things up with nice heavy blacks and brushstrokes. I love this anatomy of this back right here. Love this too. He knocks them right out of the panel. Love that cropping right there. So much can be learned from John's work. And of course, John drew the voluptuous ladies ever so well. This was a great issue. Just the cover of them about to battle each other. And of course, John did say his favorite inker, besides himself, was his pal, his little brother, our pal, Sal. Sal Buscema was John's favorite inker. Love this cover, but I tell you what, going from this to this, as much as I love that cover, this splash page just blew my mind. The nice sweeping curve this way, and the board cutting across like that. And you've got the verticals coming down, the earth down here. I mean, it's just so gorgeous. This to me is so much more dynamic, just because this is straight up and down. I mean, it works for a cover, but this is just has so much rhythm and flow through it. And it's weird too, when John did more Surfer stuff, I liked the first few issues of Surfer more because he drew them thicker. But as his Surfer run went on, he started drawing them leaner, and I just wasn't that much of a fan of that. Mephisto showed up in Surfer. I believe issue 4, and I think they'll show it. There it is, issue 4, Silver Surfer, one of the best issues of the book, Surfer against Thor. I remember reading Stan Lee, who wrote it, wasn't happy with what John did on it. And this is the opening splash page from Silver Surfer number 4. Great shot of Loki. Great use of the negative space here for the title and stuff. But Stan wasn't happy with it because when John got it, John loves Thor, you know. So John was like, I want to do different type of layouts, and he just was kind of like, I'm just going to go nuts. And apparently when Stan first saw it, he wasn't thrilled with it because of the way John handled it. But as time went on, I think Stan said it was his favorite issue. Inking Spotlight, Sal Buscema, his fave. And then Surfer, he did a little less detail on the shine as the book went on the Surfer's body, and he leaned him up just a little too much for my taste. I like the way the Surfer looked in the beginning. This is another great splash page from the book I've always loved. Silver Surfer 10, that's it. Inked by Dan Atkins. Dan Atkins, I believe Dan Atkins, God, Ink Spotlight Dan Atkins, let me see. There it is. He joined, yep, Dan Atkins worked with Wally Wood. That's what I thought. I wanted to make sure before I said it. Once again, I just love this tech that John would do. Love these fingers as well. Just gorgeous. This is from How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. This is one of the, Chick Stone. I'm sorry, but Chick Stone did not do John any favors. Chick, if you're looking down on me, because I don't think you're with us any longer, I'm just not a fan of what you did over John Buscema. Maybe it was a deadline thing. You had to crank it out. I don't know. John did covers for the issues of X-Men when they were doing, were these reprints at the time? No, these weren't. I thought these were reprints. I'm not sure. X-Men started reprinting their book before Neil Adams, or after Neil Adams. Oh, I'm not sure. I need Dennis here. Dennis is my X-Men guy. But point is, John Buscema did some covers for the X-Men, and I'm like, oh my God, I would love to have seen John Buscema draw the X-Men. And he did a little bit, but not enough. Dick Ayers, inking John. John also did some romance comics. Oh, speaking of, inked by Don Heck and John Romita Sr. and Joe Sinnott. Before we get to those, Submariner number 20 splash. I have this one. I thought this was just great. But, so John, inked by Don Heck. I love Don Heck's work when he pencils and inks himself. But he's another guy. He has an inking style that you can pretty much tell when Don Heck inks somebody. You can still see John Buscema here in the face, but Don Heck has these nice contrasting ink lines of thick and thins going through it. And Buscema drew some My Love Story, Our Love Story, just great romance stuff. Yes, I own them because it's John drawing real people, real clothes, no superhero stuff. And the acting he did with those characters in those books is just phenomenal to learn from. Of course, he worked on Fantastic Four. Here is a beautiful page of John Buscema full pencils. Oh, that is just gorgeous. John's full pencils. Good stuff. Fantastic Four 112. Thing getting into it with the Hulk now. Before it was the Submariner. Now he's getting into it with the Hulk. This whole issue is great. It's just those two fighting. Inks by Joe Sinnott. You can see the power that John is just getting into his work. Ink Spotlight, Joe Sinnott. Like, I will say, and this could be sacrilege, I prefer John Buscema over Jack Kirby. If I had to choose one or the other, I will take John Buscema over Jack Kirby. Because Jack Kirby's anatomy was just a little too stylized for me. And I thought John Buscema's anatomy was pretty right on in the pseudo-realistic style. And he took those Jack Kirby dynamics and just, wow. And he did Jack Kirby type buildings because I've never seen buildings that look like this. But who cares? This is great. Now in comics, when you draw New York, and this is New York, but now when you draw New York in comics, oh, buildings should look like New York buildings and blah, blah, blah. So just make stuff up. Who cares? Great covers, more interior stuff. Joe Sinnott inked a lot of John's stuff when he first did FF. Then he came back in the 80s and did Fantastic Four, and Sal Buscema inked that stuff. Of course, John had a long run on Thor. A lot of it inked by Sinnott. A lot of it inked by Vinnie Coletta, too. And I liked Vinnie Coletta's inks. Here's another great example of John's pencils. Of course, a beautiful figure of a woman. Ink Spotlight, Vince Coletta. Beautiful cover here from Thor 272. John inked that himself. Gorgeous. It's gorgeous. This was inked by Tony DeZuniga. How to draw the John Buscema way, or the Buscema way. John actually started, it didn't last, and only a few people went through it, but John started a workshop where you could attend in person and learn to draw with John as your teacher. I was only about 7 at the time, 7 or 8, so I was way too young. But I tell you what, oh my God, I would love to have been able to take that. I was blessed to be able to go to the Kubert School, so that was obviously thrilling. Ink Spotlight, John Buscema, that's right, because he inked his own stuff oh so well. We get into, of course, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. One of my go-to books. Still love this book. One of the things that I miss is when I was a kid, I first saw this book. I could never get that feeling again of when I first opened up How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and my mind was just like, whoosh, just blown. And as a kid, I would take it back to the library, recheck it out until I finally owned my own copy. And every time I would just see these little things and learn more. I still own it. I have a couple copies of it. I have a soft cover and I have a hard cover with the dust jacket pretty beat up. Still love the book, but it's just, I'll never get that excitement again. This is great because this is boring. I mean, it's okay, but this Doctor Doom's pretty boring. This is way more exciting. Here's the sad part. In a lot of Marvel comics today, this is what you see. This. And I've often said before, some of these editors need to look at How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way and go, no, no, no. This. You know, it's ridiculous. I love this as a kid, seeing the construction he would go through to get to the final page. This page was an amalgamation of pages he put together from Surfer. This page never actually appeared this way in the book. Here's actually how it appeared in the books. You can see he pulled some panels here and whatnot. Movies, Monsters, and Magic. That's right, Giant-Sized Man Thing. He did some Frankenstein stuff. This is stuff I still need to hunt down. Dracula Lives. He even did work on Epic Illustrated with Marie Severin doing the inks. You can tell it's John Buscema, but she just gives it this different texture to the inking. And then one of John's favorite movies was The Wizard of Oz. And when Marvel put out the Treasury size edition of The Wizard of Oz, story goes that John loved the movie so much, he was able to draw all the characters from memory. That's insane. Klaus Janson, Raiders of the Lost Ark, movie adaptation drawn by John, inked by Klaus. Klaus brought such a great look. The Labyrinth, breakdowns by John, finishes by Romeo Tangal. And of course, gotta talk Conan, John's favorite stuff. He took over after Barry Windsor Smith. They actually wanted John to draw the book from issue 1, but they didn't know how well Conan would sell, so they didn't do it because John would have cost too much. So they went with this new kid, Barry Windsor Smith, instead. And then Conan, of course, did really well. Barry Windsor Smith left the book. Slide in John Buscema. He did some Kazar work as well. This is where John really came to life. He loved this stuff. Ink spotlight on Alfredo Acala, a great artist in his own right when it came to pencil and inks. But you pair him up with the right artist, and he was just wonderful. This is great right here. This is one of the few covers or illustrations by John that's not in a romance comic that John Romita Sr. inked over John Buscema. You can kind of see it in that face. Definitely the feathering that John Romita does. I love this issue just because of that cover. Ernie Chan did most of the inking over Buscema on Conan. You know, some of the stuff I liked, some of it I didn't like. When Ernie would draw stuff himself, it would almost look like John's work. So he was very influenced by the way John constructed figures and such. Of course, Master of Kung Fu, Tarzan. Here's some Tarzan pencils. I wish these were bigger. This is the stuff. I'll take my Tarzan run by John Buscema over the Conan run any day of the week. Yes, that is sacrilegious, but too bad. That's how I feel. John did the Conan strip, a bunch of it, for a while as well. Ink spotlight, Tony DeZuniga, nudity there. Uh-oh. He drew some Doc Savage covers. I mean, John did it all. Luckily, and this book doesn't show any of it, he did make his way to DC to do some stuff for DC at the later part of his career, which was very, very cool to see. He did the imagining of Stan Lee, imagining Superman. That was cool. He did do the first crossover, though, of Superman, Spider-Man, inked by Joe Sinnott. This was, I think John was hitting on all cylinders. My biggest critique of this book is the one DC put out that Ross Andrew drew and Dick Giordano inked. Superman, Spider-Man had very inventive page layouts, whereas the Marvel one was a lot of 6-panel grids, and I really wish I could have seen John just let loose and break out of that. I don't know if it was a dictate that he had to do it that way, but it's still at least a fantastic looking book, and getting to see John Buscema draw classic Superman. I believe this is John inks right here from Savage Sword of Conan. Very illustrative, very Hal Foster looking as well. Storytelling is not that great because you see this panel and then you're supposed to go from this panel to this panel to this panel. When I see something like this, I always think of this, then this. But, we all have our Good Days and Bad Days. Rudy Nebrez, another fantastic artist in his own right, doing some inking. More Savage sort of Conan stuff. I love seeing pages like this that are partially inked. Back to the Heroes. Avengers 267. You get to see Storm, at least, out of the X-Men. This is in the later 80s. Tom Palmer was doing finishes over John Buscema's breakdowns. But here we have Fantastic Four, 298. This is wrong. This says it's inked by Tom Palmer. This is not inked by Tom Palmer. This is inked either by John or I'm almost positive this is inked by Sal. This is not inked by Tom Palmer, so that's a mistake. These are inked by Tom Palmer. This is not. This, I believe, is inked by Sal. John actually did a 4-issue Silver Surfer series, miniseries that Bill Sienkiewicz inked that was glorious. This is a fantastic issue. I wish John drew the inside, but he didn't. He did a whole Silver Surfer graphic novel that was all splash pages. So if you're a fan of that, get it. He inked it himself. These are a couple of the splashes from it. I highly recommend it. Some more stuff. Oh, he did a nice little run on Wolverine, inked by Klaus, and I believe Al Williamson. This is a very beautiful page from the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. This character's inked by Joe, but then here's some more John Buscema sketches that are just lovely. His character acting was just phenomenal. Here we go. John Buscema, Al Williamson right here. Al Williamson, a fantastic artist. Came up with Frazetta, friends with Frazetta, did Flash Gordon and Star Wars. In the latter part of his career, he inked John Romita Jr. and John Buscema, and mostly, but other guys, but just great work. Ink Spotlight, Al Williamson, there you go. John also did a graphic novel starring Wolverine called Bloody Choices that he penciled and inked. That's another one I can't recommend enough to get, seeing just the power of John's raw pencil and inks. Here we go. Ink Spotlight, Bill Sienkiewicz. He inked some Wolverine stuff. John did the Punisher part of Punisher vs. Archie. And then he did a story for Silver Surfer Rune, inked by Bill Anderson. I've been inked by Bill Anderson. And then we get to the retirement part. The last thing he did, Superman Blood of My Ancestors for DC Comics, inked by Kevin Nolan. And the thing is, Kevin Nolan, usually it's hard to see the artist underneath, but he paired up and did such a great job inking John. And then unfortunately, John passed away drawing it and Gil Kane finished it. But Kevin inked the whole thing. This is the stuff. This is inked by Bill Sienkiewicz right here. This Surfer stuff. He did come back and do some some Conan stuff. So this is just towards the latter part of his career stuff he did. Deathlock number 10 pencils. So he just kind of hit or miss. JLA Barbarians character studies that he never got to actually do because he passed away. I don't believe this job ever saw print. JLA Barbarians, pages 2 and 3. How cool would that have been? And a bibliography and published works. So you can break down and see all of John's published works. And there's a painting by Tom Palmer of the man himself, John Buscema. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's book look. John Buscema, Michelangelo of comics. I highly recommend you get this book if you're a fan of John Buscema. Your hostess with the mostest, Andy Smith, signing off, 30-year veteran of the comic book industry. Check out my website, andysmithart.com. Back my book, First Man 2 Learning Curve. It's on Indiegogo. Link in the description below. See you guys next time. Bye-bye. First Man 2 now, live on Indiegogo.